takeover or comprehensive reforms, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. New York's Mayor Zohran Mamdani in his first White House meeting with Trump criticized U.S. support for Israeli military actions, calling them a genocide, and urged redirecting funds to New York City needs amid rising child homelessness. Israel strikes Ain al-Helwain camp in Lebanon, killing 13 Hamas members. Hamas calls it a massacre. Tensions remain high near Sidon despite last year's ceasefire with Hezbollah. The UN World Food Programme says aid reaches Gaza after ceasefire, but only 30% of the 40,000-ton target has been met, reaching 500,000 people. Heavy rains have spoiled some aid, food prices stay high, and sustained support is needed. Trump pushes the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine, saying Zelensky must accept it as a winter and casualties rise. Meanwhile, Putin confirms receiving the plan and warns of more territorial gains if Kyiv refuses, while Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the U.S. and Europe and welcomes any realistic proposal to end the war. European leaders react to the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine. European Union's von der Leyen says Kyiv must decide its own future. Germany's Merz and Trump discussed next steps at the advisor level. UK's Starmer says allies will review the plan at the G20, while UN's Guterres says any deal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. U.S. President Donald Trump and New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani put aside months of public feuding in a warm White House meeting, trading praise and vowing to work together on crime and affordability in America's biggest city. They then showed appreciation of each other as they were able to move past their differences. China's top general Zhang Huyujia and Russian Defense Minister Andrei Beluzov have agreed in Moscow to deepen military cooperation as both sides shared a new strategic blueprint amid growing tensions. Senior delegations led by Andrei Malyugin and Li Jiang also held talks on strategic stability while vowing closer coordination on security issues. Territorial rains and landslides in central Vietnam have killed 55 people and left 13 missing, with Dak Lak and Can Hoa provinces suffering the most devastation after rainfall topped 1.9 meters in a week. The disaster has caused $341 million in economic damage, flooded 235,000 homes, and ruined 80,000 hectares of crops in one of Vietnam's key coffee and tourism regions. And let's move on to the big focus story that we are tracking here on NewsX World. Now, New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, in his first White House meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump, he has stated his accusation that the Israeli government is committing genocide and to criticize U.S. funding of Israeli military actions. He has also told Donald Trump that many New Yorkers want their tax dollars redirected from foreign conflicts to basic needs at home, citing a 9th consecutive year in which more than 100,000 school children in New York City are homeless. Mamdani also stated that he told the president that he appreciates all his efforts towards peace, including those attributed to Trump in the Middle East, but stressed that such efforts must be matched by adherence to international human rights. Let's listen in to what Zohran Mamdani had to say first.
I've spoken about the Israeli government committing genocide, and I've spoken about our government funding it. And I shared with the president in our meeting about the concern that many New Yorkers have of wanting their tax dollars to go towards the benefit of New Yorkers and their ability to afford basic dignity. And what we see right now is we're in the 9th consecutive year of more than 100,000 school children being homeless in our city. And there's a desperate need not only for the following of human rights, but also the following through on the promises we've made New Yorkers. And I appreciated the meeting we had and the work that we can do. I appreciate all efforts towards peace, and I shared with President Trump that when I spoke to Trump voters on Hillside Avenue, including one of whom was a pharmacist that spoke about how President Trump's father actually went to that pharmacy not too far from Jamaica Estates, that people were tired of seeing our tax dollars fund endless wars. And I also believe that we have to follow through on the international human rights. And I know that still today those are being violated, and that continues to be work that has to be done no matter where we're speaking of.
And now joining us live on the bulletin is Professor Rohan Gunratna, who's an international affairs expert. He's joining us live from Singapore. A very warm welcome to you, Professor Gunratna. Now, Zohrani has made a very strong remark in what seemed to be a very cordial meeting with Trump, but he's clearly called out a spade as a spade. While I do not expect this, but do you see Trump conceding?
What we are seeing is that both these leaders made peace, and that is going to be something very good for the United States and for New York. Of course, Mamdani has the point of view that Israel is committing genocide, and if one looks at Israel's response, which is very harsh, it was a direct result of a very brutal terrorist attack by Hamas. So in fact, Mamdani should have first condemned Hamas for conducting a very brutal terrorist attack in 2023 that prompted Israel to defend itself by conducting operations to dismantle Hamas. So the meeting of these two leaders, the president and the mayor-elect, gives us a lot of hope that there will be peace and harmony, because Mamdani has also said that he is going to arrest Netanyahu when he comes to New York. Netanyahu has said that whatever threats are made against him, he will travel to New York to address the UN. So I believe that there should be greater cooperation, collaboration, and partnership to fight terrorism because terrorism is a preeminent threat. Certainly, human rights of every citizen, especially the Palestinians, should be protected. But what is important is that no other terrorist attacks won't emulate Hamas. And that's why Hamas needs to be completely eliminated and that group dismantled so that it will send a very clear message to the international community that terrorism will not be tolerated in the early 21st century.
Sure. Let's also speak about how Mamdani has called out the homelessness crisis in New York City. What do you think can we expect in the future from Mamdani himself, and if Trump is going to offer any cooperation to help address this crisis?
As a frequent visitor to New York City, I can tell you that this great city is plagued by so many challenges, but primarily from homelessness, from drugs, from extremism. So all these challenges will have to be systematically addressed by the young, energetic Mayor Mamdani, and he will need a lot of support from Trump and from other leaders. So this particular meeting at the White House is something good, because that shows that Mamdani is able even to reach out to his political enemies and work with them to make New York City great again.
Well, sure. Well, both Trump and Mamdani now seem to be moving on the Make America Great Again campaign, as is apparent from their first meeting. But time will tell if this cooperation and cordiality between the two leaders continues. For now, I thank you, Mr. Gunratna, for joining us live here. And I also request you to stay on with us as we have some more news now coming in. Now, Israel's military, viewers, says that a strike on the Ain al-Helwa Palestinian refugee camp in southern Lebanon has killed 13 Hamas members. Lebanese authorities have confirmed at least 13 fatalities but did not identify them. Meanwhile, the Israeli army claims the strike targeted a Hamas training compound and vows to continue cooperation and these operations against the group in Lebanon. Hamas has released photos of the deceased and condemned the attack as a horrific massacre, denying military installations were in the camp. Now, the crowded camp near Sidon remains tense as Israel continues strikes despite last year's ceasefire with Hezbollah. I want to bring Professor Gunratna back into the discussion here. Now, Mr. Gunratna, there's clearly a difference in statements that have been made by Israel and Hamas. Do we see, and this is clearly after a ceasefire has been violated, how do you see the war proceeding from here on?
Kriti, as you very rightly said, this is a huge challenge. Israel striking Hamas in a refugee camp in Lebanon. But I want to tell you that refugee camp has been also a safe haven for many terrorist groups over a very long period of time. I had traveled to Lebanon and I had visited that facility. So I want to tell you that it is high time for Hamas to demobilize, because Hamas cannot exist as an entity after a brutal terrorist attack like the October 2023 attack. So Israel has done the right thing, because Israel has dismantled Hamas structures using military force, because if Israel is not going to do that, Hamas will reorganize and come back and stage another attack. Hamas' intentions of conducting attacks have not diminished. We have been monitoring the Hamas media, and Hamas members are still promoting, and some are saying that they want to do another October 2023 style attack. So this will be the standard operating procedure, where Israel will continue to strike wherever Hamas exists, not only in Gaza, but anywhere in the world. So these attacks will be staged by IDF, and also where IDF cannot reach, Mossad will conduct those attacks. So this will be the pattern in the coming weeks, coming months, and the coming years, because after such a brutal attack, Israel wants to make sure that Hamas as an organization does not exist.
Well, we will be looking forward to that. For now, thanks, Professor Gunratna, for joining us and sharing your insights with us. And our viewers, we shift focus. The UN World Food Programme says that more food is reaching Gaza since the October ceasefire, but humanitarian needs remain critical. Heavy winter rains have spoiled some delivered supplies, adding to the challenges for families in the war-torn territory. Since the ceasefire, 40,000 tons of aid have entered Gaza, but only 30% of the target has been met, reaching just over 500,000 people. Food prices remain high and many Palestinians rely on aid, with some unable to afford basic items like chicken, which now costs $25. The World Food Programme says sustained support is essential to help families rebuild their nutrition, health and livelihoods. And now joining us live on this story to give his insights is Major General Dr. Rajan Kochur, who is a senior strategic and international affairs expert, joining us live from New Delhi. A very warm welcome to you for joining us on this bulletin at NewsX World. And now clearly the refugee crisis continues to remain, and in Palestine we're seeing how those in the camps are unable to meet their basic needs. What kind of support should be given to these people in the camps?
Thank you, Kriti. It's a very difficult situation for the Gazans as of now, because there are tremendous logistical challenges, because they are very far spread out, and to bring this humanitarian aid to each and every person in Gaza is a logistical challenge. And a second important aspect is that no storage infrastructure is also available, because you see, if you are able to bring in, I'll just give you an example. Supposing 500 trucks have moved into Gaza. So now these trucks will have to move around different areas, north part of Gaza, central part of Gaza, south part of Gaza. And you, after the aid is distributed, there would be some undistributed aid also. So you need to have a storage space. Also, you need to have a storage space to bring in more tons of food. As you said in your opening narrative, that only 50% of the Gazas have so far been supplied with these items, and the capacity also is only 30% to that requirement of that people there. So you would have to create some kind of a temporary storage capacity, because and these activities have to go side by side. You can't wait for the infrastructure to come up and things like that. You have temporary storage shelters available, and WFP can organize it in consultation with the UN. Support of the Israelis would also be warranted in this kind of a case. And now the winters are approaching. So there is also a significant challenge, because in winters you will find that people are going to be affected more due to the weather conditions. Second is that there is a heavy malnutrition in this area. There are a large number of children who are have got life-threatening diseases. So how do we deal with this particular problem? Because aid is one part of it, that is the food and other things. What about the medical supplies, the oxygen, the blood banks, the surgery, the doctors, the hospitals? So I think that is also another area where the rebuilding temporary systems have to come up, because unless we have a multi-pronged strategy for Gaza, I don't think even by sending this aid, though I'm glad that things have started moving there, it's a positive signal, but much more is required to be done.
Well, sure. Well, capacity building will definitely remain a big challenge in the war-torn region. But Dr. Rajan, I requested to stay on with us as we have some more news coming from Palestine, where in the West Bank, Palestinians are mourning the death of a local police officer, Yunus Ashtieh, who was reportedly killed during an Israeli raid in the village of Tel near Nablu. Now, the incident comes amid continuing tension across the West Bank, where Israeli operations and armed clashes have grown increasingly frequent. The killing of Ashtieh adds to the rising toll in the region, underscoring yet again how volatile the situation remains for civilians and security personnel alike. Now, I want to bring back Dr. Rajan into the discussion on this. Dr. Rajan, do we see Palestine in any capacity, will it be able to retaliate to these kind of attacks?
Kriti, I think it's unlikely because military autonomy is there in West Bank, and most of the areas are dominated by the Israel Defense Forces, and therefore I don't think Palestinian Authority has got much of leeway. You see, as far as the security and the stability of this region is actually concerned, and tensions are already very fragile, because I have seen that a small incident also gets exaggerated, and the people are also come onto the streets, and there is a law and order situation. So there is much to do with the military aspect, though civil policing is under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority. So I think this incident is going to be significant, because when you go after these terrorists or the militants, you cannot be seen killing a man in uniform who is part of the police force. So these raids which are taking place by the IDF definitely needs more collaboration, deliberation, and it should not happen that you carry out indiscriminate firing and resort to killing of policemen, because why it is important is because it has an escalation risk. Because once you target a Palestinian like this, you may find that the escalation of the law and order situation, with the people also coming on the streets and protesting, because whenever such an incident happens, there is a public mourning. You will find that a rally you will be organized by people in the form of a protest, or there will be a call for a retaliatory action. So I think these incidents are very, very sensitive. They need to be handled with a great deal of sensitivity, and especially when there is a perception in the West Bank that the Israelis are trying to change the demography of the West Bank. If you remember, 22 settlement colonies have recently been established in the West Bank region after a period of 10 years. So we see that the situation in Gaza is stabilizing. We don't want a situation in the West Bank to develop to create another pressure point here. So I think Israelis should take note of this and be slightly more careful whenever they carry out the raids next time.
Sure, well, you do call for Israelis to be careful, but do you see that happening? Do we see IDF bringing down its operations in the West Bank, particularly on any level?
No, I don't see that happening because there is a specific agenda in which the political establishment of Israel is actually working now, and especially Netanyahu and his far-right elements in the government, because they are quite confident and vociferous in carrying out these activities in the West Bank. And also, one larger point I would like to make here is that Israel is not looking at a two-state solution at all. So there is no future I envisage as far as the Palestinians are concerned, because Palestinians are not going to get their own state, at least in the near future. So what then I can presume is that these kind of raids, activities, and harassment and having these roadblocks on the roads, checking off the population in the various areas, even the mosque itself, people are being checked to go there. So I don't feel that Israelis have a mindset right now to reduce their activities in the West Bank, because they have a clear mandate that there won't be any two-state in the near future.
All right, sure. Thanks, Dr. Kocher, for joining us and sharing those insights with us on NewsX World. Viewers, we now move on. Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun has said that state monopoly on weapons were inevitable, and he has urged a committee supervising a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah to ensure the army was the only armed presence in the southern Lebanon. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
ولم نعد قادرين على الحياة في ظل انعدام الدولة. والمسألة هنا لا تعني فقط حصر السلاح وقرار السلم والحرب، وهذا ضروري جدا وحتمي فعلا، بل المطلوب أكثر هو حصر ولاء اللبناني بوطنه وحصر انتمائه الدستوري والقانوني إلى دولته.
Let's tell you, viewers, that however, under the heavy pressure by US and fearing the expanded Israeli strikes, Lebanon has committed to disarming the Iran-backed terror group Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Aoun has stated that Lebanon is ready to negotiate with the US and the UN. Let's also listen into that.
أن الدولة اللبنانية جاهزة للتفاوض برعاية أممية أو أمريكية أو دولية مشتركة على أي اتفاق يرسي صيغة لوقف نهائي للاعتداءات عبر الحدود.
And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Trump pushes a U.S. peace plan for Ukraine, saying Zelensky must accept it as winter and casualties rise. Putin confirms receiving the plan and warns of more territorial gains if Kyiv refuses. Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the U.S. and Europe and welcomes any realistic proposal to end the war. European leaders react to the US peace plan for Ukraine. EU's von der Leyen says Kyiv must decide its own future, while Germany's Merz and Trump discuss next steps at the advisor level. UK's Starmer says allies will review the plan at the G20, while UN's Guterres stresses any deal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. US President Donald Trump and New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani put aside months of public feuding in a warm White House meeting, trading praise and vowing to work together on crime and affordability in America's biggest city. They then showed appreciation of each other as they were able to move past their differences. China's top general Zhang Yuxia and Russian Defense Minister Andriy Belousov have agreed in Moscow to deepen military cooperation, as both sides shared a new strategic blueprint amid growing tensions. Senior delegations led by Andriy Melyugin and Li Qijiang also held talks on strategic stability while vowing closer coordination on security issues. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in Johannesburg that China is ready to build trust and expand strategic cooperation. This comes as Li, who is attending the G20 summit, said China will align its new 15th five-year plan with South Africa's 10-point economic plan and push for the early implementation of zero-tariff treatment. China and Vietnam have completed their 39th joint naval patrol in the Beibu Gulf, with 2 vessels from each side conducting security monitoring, information exchanges, and a coordinated search, as well as rescue drill. The patrol, part of a 2005 bilateral agreement, highlighted growing cooperation amid complex maritime conditions. Meanwhile, torrential rains and landslides in central Vietnam have killed 55 people and left 13 missing, with Dak Lak and Can Hoa provinces suffering the most devastation after rainfall toppled 1.9 meters in a week. The disaster has caused $341 million in economic damage, flooded 235,000 plus homes, and ruined 80,000 hectares of crops in one of Vietnam's key coffee as well as tourism region. A bipartisan group of U.S. House lawmakers led by Brian Fitzpatrick have moved to bypass Speaker Mike Johnson and force a vote requiring 218 signatures on a bill, imposing sweeping new sanctions on Russia, including 500% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil, gas, or uranium. The vote is expected after the Thanksgiving recess. Now we start with Moscow. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will have to like a U.S.-backed peace plan to halt Russia's invasion and ultimately approve it. Trump has also said that the approaching winter, the mounting death toll, and repeated attacks on Ukrainian energy plants underscored the urgency of ending the war. Let's listen into what President Donald Trump has shared.
I've spoken with their people. We have a plan. It's horrible what's happening. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I was president, and it's a shame. And I thought they should have acted quicker. But it's a cold winter, and a lot of the you talk about utilities, but a lot of the big energy-producing plants have been under attack. To put it mildly, to put it nicely. We have a way of getting peace, or we think we have a way of getting peace. He's going to have to approve it. Just so sad, so many people. Last month they lost 25,000 soldiers. This is something, we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials say that President Donald Trump is working with both Ukraine and Russia to end the war as quickly as possible. As Vice President J.D. Vance has also stated in a social media post that any plan to end Russia and Ukraine's war should preserve Ukrainian sovereignty and be acceptable to both countries, but that it was a fantasy to think Ukraine could win if the U.S. just gave Kyiv more money or weapons or imposed more Russian sanctions. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that a U.S. plan could lay the foundation for a Ukraine peace deal, confirming for the first time that Moscow had received a copy from the United States. Putin also threatened to seize more territory if Kyiv rejects the proposal, saying that the recent capture of Ukrainian city Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front line. Let's listen into what President Putin has shared.
Полагаю, что и он может быть положен в основу окончательного мирного урегулирования. Если в Киеве не хотят обсуждать предложение президента Трампа и отказываются от этого, то и они, и европейские поджигатели войны должны понимать, что события, которые произошли в Купянске, будут неизбежно повторяться и на других ключевых участках фронта.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has also responded after a phone call with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance that Ukraine would work with the United States and Europe at an advisor level to work towards a peace plan for his country's war with Russia. He has also emphasized that Ukraine has always respected and continues to respect U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to put an end to the bloodshed, and they view every realistic proposal positively. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. As you have mentioned and emphasized so many times with us and for our viewers that, this bloodshed has to come to an end. Do you think we are seeing some horizon for it, and do you think this US-backed peace plan that Ukraine is expected to ultimately approve, including giving up some territory, how do you think this is going to affect the power balance between Washington, Moscow, and Kyiv?
Good morning, Asoma.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me this is a very important session, let me tell you.
Yes.
And I must compliment NewsX World to have selected the theme and focusing on a discussion. In your question, there are more than two subparts, but I'll take only two important subparts. The two important subparts is about the peace proposal to bring this mindless conflict of Russia-Ukraine war to an end. And the second one that you indicated is about the power balance, consequent power balance. The first thing is about the peace proposal. I'm glad that the leadership role is being played by United States in a most pragmatic manner. And as it is, the president of USA had made a commitment during his campaigning that he will bring the conflict to an end within 24 hours. Doesn't matter if it has not happened in 24 hours, at least he is one man who is channelizing all his effort and trying to marshal support from all concerned, all relevant and irrelevant stakeholders to bring this meaningless and mindless conflict to an end. But allow me to say a couple of issues in the peace proposal. His start point is that whatever land has been occupied by Russia, that has to be foregone by Ukraine. It's a great start point. It's a very pragmatic start point because the students of history would do well if they look back to Thucydide historical works. Thucydide philosophy always said that the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. It's very important to realize that Ukraine armed forces or as an economy or as a nation does not stand anywhere before the erstwhile superpower which the legacy of which has been transferred or carried forward to Russia. It doesn't stand anywhere by prolonging the conflict unnecessarily. Therefore, to bring this conflict to an end, you have to reconcile with the Thucydide, the name of the conflict, if I recall correctly, Asoma, it is Peloponnesian War, which took place and which Thucydide has referred. And there is a great debate and also a discussion on the whole issue. They come to a conclusion that in today's 21st century, the power of a country is what matters. Morality and ethics, they have no relevance. So therefore, to bring some kind of prospective progress on the issue, I think it's a great start point. Second point is about the legitimacy of Zelensky. Doesn't matter, there are so many things which have happened in the world which have been illegitimate for a larger good cause of the world order, to bring in some kind of stability, reduce the geopolitical churn. If something has to be compromised and some innovative system has to be adopted, that must be. Zelensky, as on today, is not the president of, technically and legally speaking, he is not the president. Even if he is not the president, some kind of recognition or identity and an extension of his status unofficially, informally, is being applied for the sake of governance of the Ukraine. Third and most important point is, whatever the case may be, once the the proposal is agreed to, it has to be ratified in the parliament of Ukraine, which I'm sure with the intervention of United States, they definitely would put pressure and make sure that they navigate the complex process of ratification within Ukraine in a meaningful and conclusive manner. And last point is that once it is agreed, the peace proposal, ultimately it will boil down to some give and take. The give and take is a matter of, sitting across the table, talking it out, and bringing some kind of a practical, acceptable solutions to all the relevant stakeholders. But the central point would be, if you allow me to say, is that the current problem of Russia-Ukraine war has to be correctly identified. The current problem is the expansion of NATO, much against the commitment given by James Baker. He was the Secretary of State in one-on-one kind of a dialogue with Mikhail Gorbachev. If I respect my memory, 9th of February 1990. It is etched in golden letters. People must go back, and he had made a commitment. Not an inch of expansion of the sphere of influence of NATO would take place to the east of East Germany, not only East Germany, but also the entire Eastern Europe. So therefore, in keeping with that spirit and sense, some kind of a credible decision has to be taken. A security architecture between the Europe and the Central Europe has to be designed and respected and implemented on ground with the help of neutral forces, and that would tantamount that as is, where is basis is the only answer. A line of control has to be identified. Neutral forces under the United Nations have to be enforced. They have to be given due entitlement of power and authority to ensure that the whatever decisions are taken, they are implemented on the ground.
Yes. Thank you very much, Major General. We'll come back to you. Please stay with us. Now we stay in this topic. Meanwhile, strong reactions are coming in from Europe over the reported US peace plan for Ukraine. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says Ukraine must have a central role in deciding its future, stressing nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. She says European leaders will discuss the US proposal today at the G20 in Johannesburg and again next week at the EU-AU meeting in Angola. Separately, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has spoken with President Trump, saying they agreed on next steps at the advisors level and that he will brief European partners. Meanwhile, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says Kiev's allies will meet on the sidelines of the G20 to examine the US plan and explore ways to secure a full ceasefire. And also, UN Chief Antonio Guterres warns any peace proposal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity, noting the reported plan has not been formally presented. Let's in fact listen into what the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has shared.
For us, as UN, the criteria of any peace plan are always based in the values of the Charter and international law. And so obviously for us, a peace solution for the Ukraine that is in line with these principles would also abide by the resolutions of the General Assembly that have clearly indicated that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine and in general around the world, the territorial integrity of states must be respected.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now, you were rightfully mentioned and highlighted in our previous discussion that, the fundamental problem that lies between them must be discussed. So how might these European leaders' insistence on nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine? However, they are open to discussing things without Russia. So nothing about Ukraine without Russia reflects their ideas towards this emerging US-backed peace plan.
Great. I must compliment you, Asoma, again, asking a very brilliant question. But let me tell you one thing, whether with Ukraine or without Ukraine, with Russia or without Russia, this peace proposal, I am mindful of the fact there is a track to backdoor diplomacy which is in progress. This is a product of that backdoor diplomacy wherein all the stakeholders, I am given to understand, all relevant stakeholders have been consulted, and thereafter this conclusive kind of a proposal has been formulated. So therefore, with or without has got no meaning. And as far as the European response is concerned, it's about time that the world needs to tell the European to be practical. This is 21st century. The threat in 20th century to Europe was something different. Yes, it was well understood that Russia had invaded Europe twice, if not more, with the tanks. But in 21st century, all of them will bear me out when I make a statement that the threat in Europe is existential, that the demographic swell and the swap which is taking place is a bigger threat than Putin invading them with tanks on. And Putin, his neck is already, he is doubling down in ensuring that this conflict with Ukraine comes to a favorable, geopolitically acceptable solution as far as he is concerned. He doesn't want, he needs to be understood in the correct perspective. They are unnecessarily tinkering with an idea and provoking Russia so as to maybe they would be resorting to false flag operation to blame Russia and justify their kinetic offensive action against the Russia in time said, but that is not going to give a solution. We are looking for a solution. Third and most important point that you have raised is America is doing a great job for a change. I think they should put all their acts together and gravitate their effort towards the well-identified, well-crystallized end state. The end state is bringing the conflict to an end, no matter what response Europeans give, because the Europeans are losing sight of the fact that way back in 1990, when James Baker and Mikhail Gorbachev were meeting with each other, the Berlin Wall was to be collapsed and both the West and the East Germany were to be merged. And Mikhail Gorbachev had given his unwillingness. And when he was asked as to why is he so consistently unwilling to merge the wall, join both of them, he had expressed his intentions and the fear that he's fearing that the sphere of influence of NATO will continue to expand. And consequent to that, if you recall, Asoma,
yes,
that the Warsaw Pact members, that the very platform was dissolved with an assurance that NATO is not going to expand. But that time, as against the founding members of 12 in 1949 of NATO, in 1990, the number of members had gone up to 16. And within 4 years, by 1994, they had gone up to 19. And now today, when we are talking and discussing the issue, it has already touched a figure of 32. Where are the commitments and the principles? Therefore, it brings me back to the point of, there is some hidden agenda as far as the NATO forces are concerned. The hidden agenda is to have a greater unilateral or unitary kind of a power to exist from Eastern Europe boundaries right up to Vladivostok. That is not on. This is not going to give any kind of a committed result which the Trump is looking for. So therefore, my sense and my take on the whole issue is that America has started the great project. The peace must be put in place by pragmatic, by give and take, by practical means of finding some lasting solution and bringing peace to this mindless conflict.
100% indeed. Thank you very much for emphasizing and highlighting and sharing that important message with us in NewsX World. Thank you very much. That was Major General Siddharth with us. Now we move on to our next news. U.S. Republican lawmaker Marjorie Taylor Greene, a longtime ally of President Donald Trump, who recently had a dramatic falling out with the president, says that she is resigning from the House of Representatives effective on January 5th. The dispute between President Trump and the Georgia lawmaker has fueled concerns among some Republicans that Trump's Make America Great Again base could fracture a year before midterm elections. When Democrats hope to regain control of Congress, Greene in recent weeks has taken positions at odds with the White House and some of her fellow Republicans, which led the president to withdraw his endorsement of her. Greene's resignation will narrow the Republican majority in the White House to 218 members over the Democrats' 213. Meanwhile, Republicans have a 53 to 47 majority in the Senate. Let's listen into what Taylor Greene has shared.
Standing up for American women who were raped at 14 years old, trafficked and used by rich, powerful men should not result in me being called a traitor and threatened by the President of the United States, whom I fought for. However, while yes, hurtful, my heart remains filled with joy, my life is filled with happiness, and my true convictions remain unchanged, because my self-worth is not defined by a man, but instead by God, who created everything in existence. You see, I have never valued power, titles, or attention, in spite of all the wrong assumptions about me. I do not cling to those things because they are meaningless and empty traps that hold too many people in Washington. I believe in term limits and do not think Congress should be a lifelong career or an assisted living. And I have fought against Democrats' damaging policies like the Green New Deal, wide open, deadly, unsafe border policies, and the trans agenda on children and against women. With that has brought years of non-stop, never-ending personal attacks, death threats, lawfare, ridiculous slander and lies about me that most people could never withstand even for a single day. It has been unfair and wrong, not only to me, but especially to my family, but it's been wrong to my district as well.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for joining us again. Great to see you. Now looking at her, this news, how could Greens break from Trump influence broader dynamics between MAGA faction and traditional Republican leadership ahead of midterm elections? And are they going through some kind of change? How significant was she for MAGA?
Greetings, Asuma. Thank you so much for inviting me. What I do understand is that Marjorie's resignation is a very smart political move because it ensures that although she is going to resign pre-term, it was already set that Trump will not endorse her or probably nominate her from the Republicans' time when her term was over. So taking a self-determined break from the Republicans like this is to her benefit, because it will fracture the MAGA vote. People who, and I do believe a large part will vote for her because she's raised concerns of affordability, the Epstein files, two things which are very, very dear to the MAGA community. They do stand behind Trump, but not in this case, because there are a large number of doubting Thomases asking why Trump was hesitating in the first place. Why did he have to be pushed by Marjorie and others into revealing this? Although Marjorie has her own personal political horse to flog. She was a supporter of Matt Gaetz, who was wanting to be Attorney General, who was not nominated, whose nomination was taken back by Trump after a few controversial things came out about his past. And she had then spoken that if everybody's closets were going to be examined, a lot of skeletons will come out, be it Republican or Democrat. So she had hitched her wagon to that particular individual and has been campaigning in the name of Epstein files since then, asking for a full release so that nobody is spared. Of course, the way these files are going to be released, even though after the sign of President Trump, there is a clause that if there is an ongoing investigation, the full declaration is not going to be made public. And so there are a lot of people who are going to be spared the embarrassment of having their names displayed in full public view. But Marjorie herself has made a smart move. Now Democrats are hailing her as a fearless tigress, a fearless politician, and that she puts Americans first rather than be the MAGA community. So the Democrats are now hailing the person that Trump is calling a rhino, a Republican in name only. And so it is going to split the votes, probably benefit the Democratic nominee, because after her resignation within 30 days, they're going to have to hold an election on that place. And Democrats are definitely in a more positive place than Republicans in winning that particular seat now.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Shruti Dasgupta for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay in this region now. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump met New York City's mayoral-elect Zohran Mamdani in the Oval Office. Once billed as a political showdown, the meeting focused instead on shared priorities like housing, groceries, utilities, and the cost of living crisis. Trump repeatedly praised Mamdani, calling him capable and confident. He can be a really great mayor. Let's in fact listen into Trump's statements.
But I just want to congratulate. I think you're going to have hopefully a really great mayor. The better he does, the happier I am, I will say. There's no difference in party. There's no difference in anything. And we're going to be helping him to make everybody's dream come true, having a strong and very safe New York. And congratulations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President.
We had discussions on something. I'm not going to discuss what they were, but that I feel very confident that he can do a very good job. I think he is going to surprise some conservative people, actually.
Meanwhile, Mamdani has described the meeting as productive and centered on a shared love for New York. The two also discussed lowering crime, federal immigration enforcement, and affordability initiatives, including rent freezes and universal childcare. Let's in fact listen into Mamdani's statements.
I appreciated the meeting with the president, and as he said, it was a productive meeting focused on a place of shared admiration and love, which is New York City, and the need to deliver affordability to New Yorkers, the 8.5 million people who call our city their home, who are struggling to afford life in the most expensive city in the United States of America.
Now we welcome back Shruti Dasgupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Shruti, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, I was very surprised of their friendly interaction. And what are we to make of this interaction? Surprising for probably many people, given their past open criticism of each other. What's your analysis?
You're absolutely right. What has happened in the Oval Office has both Republicans and Democrats foxed as what these two people are now cooking. Although technically speaking, any bromance with Trump generally ends up very bad for the person concerned. So I would be watching Mamdani's space very closely to see how he actually ends up ensuring that his particular promises during the campaign come to fruition. They are not likely, because while Trump promised that he will pull funding, he said he has full faith in him. I wonder whether that makes the taps, makes sure that Trump opens the taps. And they have agreed to disagree on a lot of things, according to reports, including how Mamdani called the Israeli actions in Gaza a genocide, which Trump does not support in narrative. He's spoken against the participation of USA in the Iran war. There was a lot of there was an Antifa movement almost that kind of put Mamdani on the seat of New York, and there have been Republicans who have called him jihadist as much as Mamdani has called Trump a fascist. Now, if these two forces are smiling, is this the smile of a tiger before it eats up the prey, is what we're all wondering. And we will watch the space closely, although the bromance may not be to Mamdani's credit at all once he realizes that he has to pull the line. Now, either that or Trump has found a hidden secret in the closet of Mamdani and is completely confident in making sure that this Democrat mayor will be towing the line according to the Republicans' point of view rather than the Democratic point of view. These are a few things that are a few question marks in my brain, but this bromance is definitely shocking not just America, the whole world.
Yes, indeed, we will be eyeing this bromance. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Shruti Das Gupta, that she joined us and shared that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on and we stay in the region. US President Donald Trump has praised British Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Friday, calling him a good man despite highlighting the UK's energy and immigration challenges. President Trump has also confirmed he plans to sue the BBC for up to $5 billion, claiming a January 6, 2021 speech that was deceptively edited to suggest he called for violence. Let's in fact listen into what Trump has shared.
Well, we get along very well with the Prime Minister. We made a deal with UK. I like him. He's a fine person. And, you know, I think they have some big energy problems. You know, they've got windmills all over the place. They're going to have to start using other methods because their energy is out of control. Talking about in the UK, it's out of control. And he's got that problem. He's got a big immigration problem, as you know, and he's got a big energy problem. And we talk about it. He's a good man. Prime Minister's a good man.
Meanwhile, the BBC has apologized for the edit, but it says that it strongly disagrees that a defamation claim is valid. Now we stay in US. All 23 crew members have been safely evacuated from a burning ship at San Pedro Port in Los Angeles, US. The fire caused an explosion that disrupted power and crane operations, but no injuries have been reported. Hazardous materials have been identified in several bays, and firefighters are using protective gear and breathing equipment. More than 100 firefighters, along with port police, are working to suppress the blaze and ensure crew safety. Marine units continue cooling the ship's exterior while access below deck remains restricted. Now we move on to Asia. Vietnam's disaster agency has stated that the death toll from torrential rain, flooding and landslides in central Vietnam has now risen to 55 people, with 13 people still missing. The rainfall has exceeded 1.9 meters in some parts of central Vietnam over the past week, as the region is a major coffee production belt and home to popular beaches, but it is also prone to storms and floods. Nearly half of the fatalities were in Dak Lak province, where 27 people have passed away, while 14 people have died in Can Hoa province. The government has estimated that the flooding has costed around 8.98 trillion dong to the economy. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a quick check at the headlines this hour. Trump pushes a US peace plan for Ukraine, saying Zelensky must accept it as winter and casualties rise. Putin confirms receiving the plan and warns of more territorial gains if Kyiv refuses. Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the US and Europe and welcomes any realistic proposal to end the war. European leaders react to the US peace plan for Ukraine. European Union's von der Leyen says Kyiv must decide its own future. Germany's Merz and Trump discussed next steps at the advisor level. UK's Starmer says allies will review the plan at the G20, while US Guterres stresses any deal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. US President Donald Trump and New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani put aside months of public feuding in a warm White House meeting, trading praise and vowing to work together on crime and affordability in America's biggest city. They then showed appreciation of each other as they were able to move past their differences. The US and Chinese militaries met in Hawaii from November 18 to 20 for frank and constructive maritime security talks. Officials discussed ship and aircraft encounters to improve safety and conduct. China opposed US freedom of navigation operations in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea. A follow-up meeting is planned in 2026. A bipartisan group of U.S. House lawmakers led by Brian Fitzpatrick moved to bypass Speaker Mike Johnson and force a vote requiring 218 signatures on a bill imposing sweeping new sanctions on Russia, including 500% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil, gas, or uranium. The vote is expected after the Thanksgiving recess. China's top general Zhang Huxia and the Russian Defense Minister Andrei Belorusov have agreed in Moscow to deepen military cooperation as both sides shared a new strategic blueprint amid growing tensions. Senior delegations led by Andrei Malyugin and Li Zhejiang also held talks on strategic stability while vowing closer coordination on security issues. China has taken its dispute with Japan to the UN, accusing Tokyo of threatening military action over Taiwan. China vows to defend itself if Japan intervenes, calling such actions a violation of international law. Torrential rains and landslides in central Vietnam have killed 55 people and left 13 missing, with Dak Lak and Khanua provinces suffering the most devastation after rainfall topped 1.9 meters in a week. The disaster has caused $341 million in economic damage, flooded 235,000 plus homes, and ruined 80,000 hectares of crops in one of Vietnam's key coffee and tourism regions. Viewers, US officials and lawmakers are increasingly concerned about a meeting last month in which representatives of the Trump administration met with Kirill Dmitriev to draft a plan to end the war in Ukraine. The meeting took place in Miami at the end of October and included Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Dmitriev, who leads the Russian Direct Investment Fund, one of Russia's largest sovereign wealth funds. According to sources, the meeting resulted in a 28-point peace plan for ending the war. The plan, which was made public earlier this week by Axios, came as a surprise to some US officials in various corners of the administration and has stirred confusion at embassies throughout Washington and in European capitals. It has also prompted criticism from the Ukrainians and their allies for appearing heavily tilted towards Russian interests. Meanwhile, Ukrainians who are troubled by 4 years of war with Russia are showing their skepticism over the US proposed peace plan. The 28-point plan that the US has presented to Ukraine endorses some of Moscow's demands and leaves security guarantees for Kyiv very vague, and Washington threatened to cut key support for Kyiv if it did not agree to the framework of the proposal. Let's listen in to what some of the Ukrainians have to say.
Це повна капітуляція, як на мене. Тобто там такі пункти, як здача Донбасу, признання другої російської мови, ну, це капітуляція повна. Я в лікарні працюю з військовими, так що, не знаю, не то, що втомився якось, не знаю сказати. Ну, не то, що звик, а так. Напевно, треба терпіти далі. І так не дуже довіряв, а це як узнав, так взагалі не дуже. Хоча голосував за нього, ну, в 19-му році. Ну, що це, Міндіч, що це, що, скільки грошей? Не знаю, а яка альтернатива?
Я вважаю, що це де-факто поразка, враховуючи те, як зараз налаштовані американці, які, по суті, наша держава виставляє як нашим головним партнером. Був би я військовим, я думаю, це питання набагато логічніше ставити ним. На жаль, є дуже багато відкладених проблем в країні, які належним чином не адресуються, і замість цього, коли, не знаю, довіра до президента якась загальна, напевно, на найнижчому рівні з початку повномасштабної війни, ми замість якоїсь, не знаю, конструктивної відповіді на реально важливі для нас запитання отримуємо 10-хвилинне звернення, де пояснюються і так абсолютно зрозумілі усім речі.
And now joining us live on the bulletin is Georgi Toloraya, who is professor at the Russia Academy of Science. Joins us live from Moscow. A very warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us on this bulletin. Now, Professor Toloraya, Kyiv is of the opinion that the peace plan is heavily tilted towards Russian interests. Do you think that is the case from the Russian point of view?
Well, there are many Russian points of view. You know, there are official point of view. There are some positions for the negotiations. So I cannot say that I can really describe the cumulative Russian point of view.
From the Russian government's point of view, Professor.
Hello?
From the point of view of the Russian government as well as the people of Russia.
Sorry, guys.
Mr. Toloraya, are you still connected with us?
Yes, I'm trying to find. Yes. Okay. So on the one hand, of course, the end of fight and the end of bloodshed is very much welcomed. It's that everybody's hoping for, and whatever negotiation militaries will be welcomed. On the other hand, some of my colleagues are asking themselves, the war is not about territories. The war is not about something material. It's more about the peace and security for the future generations. And if the peace deal would result in keeping Zelensky in power and his use by Europe as a weapon against Russia, and Europe said is preparing for war, then do we need this kind of deal right now? Maybe we'd better strive for the disappearance of this current Nazi regime. There should be some new government elected by Ukrainians, which should be neutral and a good neighbor for Russia. So there are different points of views, and I would say it won't be that easy to find even the deal based on the 28 points by President Trump.
All right, well, requested to stay on with us, Professor Toloraya. We have some more news in connection to the peace plan. Now, Russia's defense ministry says its forces have captured several settlements in eastern Ukraine, including Yampol in Donetsk. However, Kyiv denies the claims, saying Yampol and other towns remain under Ukrainian control. Moscow also claims control of Stavik and Novoselkiva, Malazikova, and a village in Dmitrypero. Now, Ukraine reports continued attacks but no confirmed losses. Fighting remains intense around Pokrovsk, a key logistical hub, as Russia advances slowly through Donetsk and Luhansk in its Donbas campaign. Russian forces hold about 19% of Ukrainian territory and continue operations in Zaporizhia, further south. Now, I want to bring back Professor Toloraya into the discussion here. Professor Toloraya, now it appears that Kyiv's forces are clearly fatigued from years of war. Do you see it ceding the Donbas region completely?
Well, I hope that it's of course it's the prerequisite for any deal that Donbass and Lugansk areas which joined Russia officially should be freed from Ukrainian control. It could be done either by agreement or by force. Now the use of force, of military force, is preferred, but this is not necessarily so. The Ukrainians can liberate them, can leave them voluntarily, and I hope this will be the case. But, well, the war goes on. This night there were about 70 drones hit over different Russian regions, and the number of casualties of civil population in Russia for the last couple of months, I think it exceeds 700 people which had been hit by drones and by other Ukrainian offenses. So the war goes on, unfortunately, so far.
Sure. Well, thanks, Professor Toloraya, for joining us on this discussion, and we appreciate you giving us your time. For now, viewers, we shift our focus to some more news coming in. This is on Japan and China. Now, China has taken its widening dispute with Japan to the United Nations, accusing Tokyo of threatening an armed intervention over Taiwan and vowing to defend itself in its strongest language yet in the 2-week-old dispute. According to a letter by China's UN Ambassador Fu Kong to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Japanese Prime Minister Sane Takichi committed a grave violation of international law and diplomatic norms when she said a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a military response from Tokyo. Fu Kong also stated that if Japan attempts an armed intervention in the cross-strait situation, it would be considered as an act of aggression, and China will act accordingly in its self-defense under the UN Charter and international law and firmly defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. And Ross Feingold, who is a political analyst, is joining us live from Taipei in Taiwan. A very warm welcome to you, and thank you for joining us here on NewsX World. Mr. Feingold, I want to ask you, what is Taiwan expecting from the UN forum?
Taiwan won't expect much from the UN. It's not a member, but clearly China thinks that citations to UN Charter and various notions of principles that dominate or apply at the UN will further China's argument that the Taiwan issue is an internal issue of China, and that China is not, for example, committing an act of aggression. Now, obviously, China's viewpoints about these issues are disputed. It's disputed by the people and government here in Taiwan, and to some extent, it's disputed by other countries, including Japan and the United States. But it's not a surprise that China and its spokespersons, whether that's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Beijing or its ambassador to the United Nations in New York City, they're going to cite a wide range of arguments, historical, legal, again, the UN Charter, to justify their views on this issue. But ultimately, this has now become a political foreign relations battle in the international arena, and we see people, for example, on social media lining up on one side or the other. And now one thing that we should be watching for is, what do other countries do? Because frankly, a lot of other countries have been fairly conservative about taking sides in this dispute over the past couple of weeks.
In fact, I want to stress on that last point that you raised. Do you think Japan will be reaching out to other countries to garner more support on this issue?
I would expect that Japan has already done that, and their hope would be that foreign ministries or politicians in other countries, including neighboring countries like South Korea, for example, or the Philippines, maybe India, where Japan has an increasingly close political, military, and economic relationship, would say something. And it's very possible that countries will come out and make statements along the lines of, we hope tensions can be reduced and we could all get along. What is really unknown at this point is whether or not countries are going to come out and specifically say, we agree with what the Japanese Prime Minister said. Her views are absolutely correct as far as what Japan should do in the event of a war between China and Taiwan. Now, frankly, are countries going to say something as direct as that as far as supporting specifically what Japan's Prime Minister said? I think that's unlikely. I think it's more likely that countries will make very bland general statements that they hope tensions could be reduced.
All right, Mr. Feingold, thank you for sharing your opinion with us, but I request you to stay on with us as we have some more news coming in. China's Navy says that the US and Chinese militaries held frank and constructive maritime security talks this week in Hawaii. Now, this marks a step in restoring military communications after months of trade tensions. Officials exchanged views on current maritime and air security issues, including encounters between ships and aircraft aiming to improve safety and professional conduct. Now, China reiterated its opposition to US freedom of navigation operations in the Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, calling them infringement and provocations. Both sides plan a follow-up meeting in 2026 to continue these discussions. Let's bring back Mr. Feingold into the discussion. Mr. Feingold, we've seen an elaborating meeting early on the issue, and another one is slated to be held next year in 2026. What do you see should be the key talking points of the next meeting in 2026 after the aggression from Chinese end continues in the area?
We certainly don't know whether or not that meeting will actually take place. It depends on the state of the political relationship at the time. We do know that there's past examples of the Chinese government cutting off the military-to-military contact when the political relationship between the two countries deteriorates. But if they do have a meeting a year from now, they'll probably review whatever incidents occur over the coming months, and there will definitely be incidents. There will be incidents when U.S. and Chinese ships come close, or there will be incidents when Chinese and U.S. aircraft come close, and they'll have plenty to talk about, and they're going to, one side or the other is going to say, you didn't uphold the agreement we made the last time we met about communication flow when our ships or aircraft are nearby each other. But I think it's really important to keep in mind that this meeting still went ahead, despite those tensions between Japan and China that are ongoing at the moment. And the U.S. has a defense treaty with Japan. And in recent days, the U.S. ambassador to Japan and the State Department spokesperson in Washington, D.C., they all issued statements on social media emphasizing the U.S.-Japan treaty. And so, frankly, if the United States wanted to make a bolder gesture to show its support for Japan at this current time, it could have canceled or delayed this meeting, but it didn't. So this meeting still went ahead, which I think is a really interesting aspect to what's going on right now here in East Asia.
All right, do we see a dead end going forward, or do you think any positive outcome from this meeting?
One way to look at this is, and it really doesn't matter what the issue is, whether that's military discussions or joint discussions over issues like the flow of fentanyl precursor chemicals and narcotics from China to the United States. One could say that if the two sides are talking, even at a working level, then that's a good thing. That's a positive. It's better to be talking than not talking. And we see that at the moment, President Trump clearly believes that it's better to be in dialogue with China, whether that's meeting with Xi Jinping himself when they met a few weeks ago in South Korea, or proceeding with these working level discussions about various issues. So for now, President Trump has taken the view that he'd rather be in dialogue with China rather than have these bilateral channels cut off.
Well, sure, and that is, I'm sure, in the interest of the United States itself for Trump to be in talks with Xi Jinping. For now, thanks for joining us and sharing your opinion with us, Mr. Feingold, here at NewsX World. And with that, viewers, we now move on to some news that's coming in from the United States, where 4 people were shot at a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in North Carolina. 3 people are in critical condition and 1 in stable condition following the shooting in Concord, which is about 30 kilometers northeast to Charlotte. According to the Concord police, it wasn't immediately clear what led up to the shooting, and they are still questioning the witnesses. The Concord police has stated that they have found video footage of the shooting and will soon let the public know after further investigation. However, the event was supposed to be the city's 28th annual tree lighting ceremony, and where people expected to see featuring Santa, food trucks, the film The Grinch, and fireworks before the shooting occurred. And let's now move on to some more news that's coming in from the United States. The U.S. Federal Aviation Administration has issued a warning to major airlines over Venezuela. The FAA cited a potentially hazardous situation due to rising military activity and security risks in the region. Threats could affect aircraft at all altitudes, the notice said. Now, U.S. forces have recently increased their presence, including aircraft carriers, warships, and F-35 jets. Airlines are now required to notify the FAA at least 72 hours in advance of planned flights over Venezuela. And that's all the time that we have for keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Trump pushes a U.S. peace plan for Ukraine, saying Zelensky must accept it as winter and casualties rise. Putin confirms receiving the plan and warns of more territorial gains if Kyiv refuses. Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the U.S. and Europe and welcomes any realistic proposal to end the war. European leaders react to the U.S. peace plan for Ukraine. EU's von der Leyen says Kyiv must decide its own future, while Germany's Merz and Trump discuss next steps at the advisor level. UK's Starmer says allies will review the plan at the G20, while UN's Guterres stresses any deal must respect Ukraine's territorial integrity. US President Donald Trump and New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani put aside months of public feuding in a warm White House meeting, trading praise and vowing to work together on crime and affordability in America's biggest city. They then showed appreciation of each other as they were able to move past their differences. China's top general Zhang Yuxia and Russian Defense Minister Andriy Belousov have agreed in Moscow to deepen military cooperation, as both sides shared a new strategic blueprint amid growing tensions. Senior delegations led by Andriy Malyushin and Li Qijiang also held talks on strategic stability while vowing closer coordination on security issues. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has told South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in Johannesburg that China is ready to build trust and expand strategic cooperation. This comes as Li, who is attending the G20 summit, said China will align its new 15th five-year plan with South Africa's 10-point economic plan and push for the early implementation of zero-tariff treatment. China and Vietnam have completed their 39th joint naval patrol in the Beibu Gulf, with 2 vessels from each side conducting security monitoring, information exchanges, and a coordinated search, as well as rescue drill. The patrol, part of a 2005 bilateral agreement, highlighted growing cooperation amid complex maritime conditions. Meanwhile, torrential rains and landslides in central Vietnam have killed 55 people and left 13 missing, with Dak Lak and Can Hoa provinces suffering the most devastation after rainfall toppled 1.9 meters in a week. The disaster has caused $341 million in economic damage, flooded 235,000 plus homes, and ruined 80,000 hectares of crops in one of Vietnam's key coffee as well as tourism regions. A bipartisan group of U.S. House lawmakers led by Brian Fitzpatrick have moved to bypass Speaker Mike Johnson and force a vote requiring 218 signatures on a bill, imposing sweeping new sanctions on Russia, including 500% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil, gas, or uranium. The vote is expected after the Thanksgiving recess. Now we start with Moscow. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will have to like a U.S.-backed peace plan to halt Russia's invasion and ultimately approve it. Trump has also said that the approaching winter, the mounting death toll, and repeated attacks on Ukrainian energy plants underscored the urgency of ending the war. Let's listen into what President Donald Trump has shared.
I've spoken with their people. We have a plan. It's horrible what's happening. It's a war that should have never happened. It would have never happened if I was president, and it's a shame. And I thought they should have acted quicker. But it's a cold winter, and a lot of the you talk about utilities, but a lot of the big energy-producing plants have been under attack, to put it mildly, to put it nicely. Yeah, we have a way of getting peace, or we think we have a way of getting peace. He's going to have to approve it. Just so sad, so many people. You know, last month they lost 25,000 soldiers. This is something, we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials say that President Donald Trump is working with both Ukraine and Russia to end the war as quickly as possible. As Vice President J.D. Vance has also stated in a social media post that any plan to end Russia and Ukraine's war should preserve Ukrainian sovereignty and be acceptable to both countries, but that it was a fantasy to think Ukraine could win if the U.S. just gave Kyiv more money or weapons or imposed more Russian sanctions. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that a U.S. plan could lay the foundation for a Ukraine peace deal, confirming for the first time that Moscow had received a copy from the United States. Putin also threatened to seize more territory if Kyiv rejects the proposal, saying that the recent capture of Ukrainian city Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front line. Let's listen into what President Putin has shared.
Полагаю, что и он может быть положен в основу окончательного мирного урегулирования. Если в Киеве не хотят обсуждать предложение президента Трампа и отказываются от этого, то и они, и европейские поджигатели войны должны понимать, что события, которые произошли в Купянске, будут неизбежно повторяться и на других ключевых участках фронта.
President Volodymyr Zelensky has also responded after a phone call with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance that Ukraine would work with the United States and Europe at an advisor level to work towards a peace plan for his country's war with Russia. He has also emphasized that Ukraine has always respected and continues to respect U.S. President Donald Trump's desire to put an end to the bloodshed, and they view every realistic proposal positively. Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. As you have mentioned and emphasized so many times with us and for our viewers that, this bloodshed has to come to an end. Do you think we are seeing some horizon for it, and do you think this US-backed peace plan that Ukraine is expected to ultimately approve, including giving up some territory, how do you think this is going to affect the power balance between Washington, Moscow, and Kyiv?
Good morning, Asoma.
Good morning.
Thank you for inviting me this is a very important session, let me tell you.
Yes.
And I must compliment NewsX World to have selected the theme and focusing on a discussion. In your question, there are more than 2 subparts, but I'll take only 2 important subparts. The 2 important subparts is about the peace proposal to bring this mindless conflict of Russia-Ukraine war to an end. And the second one that you indicated is about the power balance, consequent power balance. The first thing is about the peace proposal. I'm glad that the leadership role is being played by United States in a most pragmatic manner. And as it is, the president of USA had made a commitment during his campaigning that he will bring the conflict to an end within 24 hours. Doesn't matter if it has not happened in 24 hours, at least he is one man who is channelizing all his effort and trying to marshal support from all concerned, all relevant and irrelevant stakeholders to bring this meaningless and mindless conflict to an end. But allow me to say a couple of issues in the peace proposal. His start point is that whatever land has been occupied by Russia, that has to be foregone by Ukraine. It's a great start point. It's a very pragmatic start point because the students of history would